The air smelled of roasted corn, burning firewood, and the faint, sour tang of wet clothes. Umbrellas tilted, traders shouted above the downpour, and hawkers clutched their goods close like fragile dreams. Anna, 19, stood on the edge of the crowded street with a cracked plastic tray of leftover oranges balanced on her palm. Her dress, once blue, had faded to a tired gray, its hem clinging damply to her calves. A thin scarf shielded her hair from the rain, but water still traced cool paths down her neck. In her fist, she held the last $5 bill she had earned from the day's sales. Money meant to buy bread and beans for her younger brother, Chris, waiting at home. Her stomach growled. She pressed a hand to it and thought of Chris's thin arms and hollow cheeks. He hadn't had a full meal in 2 days. The note in her hand wasn't just paper, it was survival. Then she saw him. Across the street, under the shadow of a broken billboard, a man sat hunched like a fallen tree. His clothes were torn, his feet bare and smeared with mud. Rainwater dripped from his hair into his hollow eyes. His hands trembled around an empty plastic cup, and his lips moved soundlessly at first, then louder. Please, food, just a little food. Anna stopped walking. She knew that hunger. It was the same clawing emptiness in her own belly. Her instinct was to look away. She had done that many times before. You couldn't save everyone. Yet the man's eyes caught hers, a flash of humanity, despair and hope intertwined. Something shifted inside her. She glanced at the Booker, roadside diner, just a few steps away. Steam curled from pots of jollof rice and fried fish. She could smell the spices from where she stood. Her hand tightened around the note. Chris's face swam in her mind. She swallowed hard. If I spend this, what will we eat tonight? She thought. But another voice rose, quieter, gentler. If you were him, what would you pray someone to do? Before she could think herself out of it, Anna stepped into the diner. She ordered a plate of steaming rice and a piece of fried fish, her voice trembling as she handed over the bill. The woman behind the counter gave her a skeptical look but packed the food neatly in a plastic takeaway plate. Outside, Anna knelt slightly to meet the man's eye level. Rain plastered her scarf to her forehead. Here, she said softly, placing the warm food in his shaking hands. His fingers hovered over it as though it were gold. He looked up at her, eyes wide and glistening with rain and something else, disbelief. No one has done this for me in years, he whispered, voice cracking like old wood. Anna forced a small smile. Eat before it gets cold, she murmured, then turned and walked away, her heart hammering. She didn't wait for thanks. She didn't even look back. As she disappeared into the rain, the man watched her go, the steam from the rice rising like a small miracle between them. Anna's belly was empty, but her chest felt strangely full, as though she had swallowed a glowing coal of warmth in the cold rain. She didn't know it yet, but her world had just shifted forever. The rain followed Anna home like a shadow. By the time she reached the crooked lane where her one-room apartment sat, dusk had soaked the neighborhood in a dull gray light. Tin roofs clattered under the storm. Water pooled in potholes, reflecting trembling neon signs. The smell of frying oil and damp clothes mingled with the metallic tang of rusted gates. Anna pushed open the door to the tiny room she shared with Chris. It wasn't really a home, just 4 walls of peeling paint and a floor covered in mismatched mats. A single kerosene lamp flickered in the corner, casting long shadows that made the room feel even smaller. Chris sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching a dog-eared schoolbook. His eyes lit up when he saw her, but then flicked to her empty hands. "Did you buy food?" he asked quietly, his voice fragile with hope. Anna's throat constricted. She forced a smile she didn't feel. I ate earlier at the market," she lied. "I wasn't hungry." Here. She reached into her bag and produced the small loaf of bread she'd saved from the morning. It looked even smaller now, wrapped in torn paper. Chris took it slowly, like a precious gift. He tried to break it in half, to share with her, but Anna shook her head. "No. Eat. You have school tomorrow." He hesitated. "But what about you?" "I'm fine," she whispered. "Really?" Chris chewed slowly, trying to make the morsel last. Each bite felt like a blade twisting inside Anna's chest. She turned away, pretending to rummage through her bag so he wouldn't see the tears collecting at the corners of her eyes. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle. The room smelled faintly of wet clothes and kerosene. The sound of Chris's chewing was the only thing breaking the silence. Later that night, Anna lay awake on the thin mattress they shared. The ceiling above them was patched with old newspapers. Raindrops seeped through, falling in slow, cold drops near her head. She stared at the damp paper, her mind replaying the scene of the man under the billboard. His hollow cheeks, his trembling hands, his eyes when she handed him the food. Her stomach growled fiercely. She pressed her palm against it, trying to quiet the ache. She wondered how long they could keep living like this. Her parents had dreamed she would become a nurse, but she barely made enough to buy food. Yet tonight, for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt a strange lightness, as though she had kept a sacred promise to someone unseen. Across town, in a completely different world of polished marble and thick carpets, the man she had fed sat alone in a hotel suite. He was no longer in rags. The disguise lay folded neatly in a bag beside him. His posture was no longer hunched, but straight. His eyes no longer hollow, but sharp with intent. He tapped his phone, then lifted it to his ear. "Yes," he said into the receiver, his voice low but steady. "I found her. She's the one I've been looking for." He leaned back in the velvet chair, staring out at the rain. "She gave me her last," he murmured to himself. "She doesn't even know what she's done." Back in the small room, Anna reached over to pull the thin blanket higher over Chris's sleeping body. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead, whispering a silent promise. Somehow, she would find a way out. She closed her eyes, unaware that fate had already begun moving its pieces for her. 2 days later, the city smelled of wet earth and exhaust fumes. The rain had stopped but left behind puddles that shimmered like pools of mercury in the early morning light. Anna balanced a tray of oranges on her head, weaving through the bustle of the bridge market. Vendors shouted prices, buses honked impatiently. The air was thick with roasted peanuts, damp concrete, and the sweat of hundreds of strangers. She moved on autopilot, her mind still haunted by the hollow-eyed man she had fed. She wondered if he was alive, if the food had helped, if he remembered her at all. A part of her felt foolish for even thinking about it. She had her own problems. Rent was overdue, Chris needed new notebooks, and she was still hungry. Then she heard it, the low growl of a powerful engine cutting through the noise of the market. A black SUV slid to a stop by the curb, its polished body catching the weak sunlight. It didn't belong here. It was a shadow from another world. Anna's step faltered. She adjusted the tray on her head, trying to appear invisible, but she felt eyes on her. The rear door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked like it had been cut to his body. His shoes gleamed like mirrors. A gold watch caught the light on his wrist. But it wasn't his clothes that stunned her, it was his face. She blinked. It was him, the man from under the billboard, the one she had fed. Her heart thudded against her ribs. She remembered the hollow cheeks, the trembling hands. Now his skin was healthy, his eyes alive with something like purpose. He was smiling at her as though they shared a secret. "Anna." His voice was low but carried over the street's noise, warm and certain. The tray trembled on her head. "Yes," she managed. People nearby turned to stare. A hawker whispered, "Who is that?" The man, Richard Carter, took a step closer, ignoring the mud splashing onto his shoes. "I owe you more than you can imagine," he said softly. "Please, come with me." Anna's throat tightened. Fear and disbelief swirled together inside her. She had nothing. No reason to be singled out by a man like this. She wanted to run, but his eyes held hers. Calm, steady, familiar. "I don't understand," she whispered. Richard's smile deepened, not arrogant but almost reverent. "You will." He gestured toward the open door of the SUV. "Please, just trust me." Around them, the market's noise dimmed in her ears, replaced by the heavy drum of her heartbeat. The SUV's tinted windows reflected her thin frame, her faded dress, the oranges trembling in her hands. She thought of Chris waiting at home, of the bread and the leaking roof. She thought of the man she had fed in the rain. She lowered the tray slowly, her fingers trembling. "If I go with you," she began, "will I be safe?" Richard's eyes softened. "Safer than you've ever been." Something in his tone, not money, not power, but sincerity, made her nod once. She stepped toward the SUV as though stepping through a doorway into another life. Inside, the car smelled of leather and cedar. Cold air wrapped around her like a shock. The seats were buttersoft. The dashboard gleamed. She sat rigidly, hands clasped, while Richard slid in beside her and closed the door. The world outside became a blur of motion. "I'm not who you think I am," he began as the car glided away from the market. His voice was calm but electric. "That day, I was testing something. My name is Richard Carter. I've been looking for someone genuine, someone kind without expectation. And you," he turned to her, eyes steady. "You gave me the last you had." Anna's heart pounded. She didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or bolt. All she could do was stare at him, her mind spiraling with the impossible. Richard leaned back, watching her. "You changed something in me that day," he said quietly. "Now let me change something for you." Anna's breath caught. For the first time in years, a flicker of hope rose in her chest, fragile and dazzling like sunlight breaking through clouds. Through the tinted glass she saw the city change. Crumbling shop fronts gave way to freshly painted buildings. Muddy alleys turned into smooth, palm-lined roads. The open gutters disappeared, replaced by trimmed hedges and white fences. Street vendors vanished. In their place were clean sidewalks and cafes with outdoor tables. It was as if she'd crossed an invisible border. Anna's throat was dry. She thought of Chris sitting on the floor of their room, his feet tucked under him, waiting for her. She wanted to text him, but she didn't own a phone. She pressed her hands tighter together, praying silently that she wasn't being lured into a trap. Richard sat beside her, not speaking for a long moment, letting her watch the city unfold. Finally, he said quietly, "You're safe here. No one will hurt you." She glanced at him, at his strong profile, the neat beard, the relaxed hands resting on his knees. He wasn't a stranger anymore, yet he wasn't familiar either. He was something entirely new. The SUV slowed, then turned into a driveway lined with magnolia trees. At the end stood a mansion that took Anna's breath away. High white pillars, wide marble steps, and windows that reflected the dying light of day like sheets of gold. A fountain gushed in the courtyard, its water catching rainbows. The gates swung open without a sound, like they'd been waiting just for her. When the car stopped, a uniformed attendant opened her door. Anna hesitated, staring at the polished stones under her feet, terrified she might dirty them with her worn-out shoes. "It's okay," Richard murmured, offering his hand. "Come." She stepped out, her legs trembling. The air here smelled different, of jasmine and fresh-cut grass, not kerosene and diesel. Birds chirped from the trees. Somewhere inside the mansion, she heard faint piano notes drifting through an open window. "Welcome," Richard said simply. Anna followed him up the marble steps, feeling as though she were walking on clouds. Inside, the foyer was vast and glowing, the chandelier above scattering light across the marble floor like diamonds. The air conditioning brushed cool fingers over her damp skin. Everything sparkled, the polished banisters, the glass-topped tables, the framed paintings she couldn't name but somehow felt drawn to. She stopped halfway across the foyer, dizzy with disbelief. Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "I just gave you food. That's all." Richard turned, his expression soft but intense. "Because kindness deserves to be rewarded," he said. "Because people like you, people who give even when they have nothing, are rare." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "You reminded me of my late mother. She used to feed strangers on our doorstep, even when she barely had enough for herself. I've been searching for someone like her spirit." Anna blinked back tears. Her hands trembled at her sides. "I didn't do it for money," she said, almost pleading. I didn't do it to get anything. That's exactly why you're the one, Richard said quietly. And I want to help you. Not just with money. With your life. With your future. He led her to a smaller sitting room with cream-colored sofas and tall windows overlooking the garden. A table was already set with steaming plates of food, grilled fish, rice, fruit, glasses of cold water beaded with condensation. The smell alone made Anna's stomach twist painfully. Eat first, Richard said. We'll talk afterward. She sat slowly, afraid to touch anything. The fork felt heavy in her hand, the water glass cool like crystal against her fingers. As she took her first cautious bite, tears stung her eyes. She had never tasted food like this. For the first time in years, she felt warmth spreading from her stomach outward, not just from the meal, but from the idea that maybe, just maybe, life had shifted. Across the table, Richard watched her without judgment, only a quiet gratitude. This is just the beginning, he said softly. Anna looked at him, her heart pounding. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to imagine something bigger than survival. Months passed, and Anna's world unfolded like a flower opening under the sun. The one-room apartment with peeling paint became a memory. She and Chris now lived in a two-bedroom flat with sunlight streaming through clean windows, a small balcony lined with potted plants, and a bathroom that didn't leak. At night, Chris no longer shivered under thin blankets. Anna cooked real dinners, rice with stew, eggs, even chicken sometimes, and watched her brother eat until his cheeks grew rounder. Each morning Anna rose before dawn, putting on her new nursing school uniform. Crisp white fabric, blue piping at the edges, and shoes that clicked softly against the floor. She tied her hair neatly, pinning back stray strands, and looked at herself in the mirror. The girl staring back still had the same brown eyes, but they were steadier now, her shoulders straighter, her spirit stronger. Yet adjusting to her new world was not as easy as slipping on new clothes. At the nursing college, the other students noticed her right away. Some whispered, some stared. Her accent, her simple manners, and the way she always packed food from home marked her as different. She overheard two girls in the restroom one afternoon. She must be someone's. You know, that's how she's paying these fees. No one just gets this lucky. The word stung, but Anna forced herself to smile in class, to focus on anatomy charts and case studies. She refused to let their assumptions undo what she had built. At night, she studied by lamplight long after Chris had fallen asleep, the soft scratch of her pen the only sound in the apartment. Through it all, Richard remained more than a benefactor. He was a guide. Some evenings he visited the apartment instead of summoning them to his mansion, sitting on the balcony with Chris while they played chess or watched the streetlights flicker on. He gave Anna not just tuition but mentorship, how to manage money, how to speak confidently, how to plan for the future. He listened more than he spoke. One evening, as they walked through the hospital ward where Anna was training, Richard paused beside her. Remember, he said quietly, watching her comfort a crying patient. Kindness is a seed. It can bloom anywhere. What you did for me, it's already blooming here. His words stayed with her. Anna began volunteering at a local orphanage on weekends, helping to dress wounds, teaching the older children how to read. She remembered the pang of hunger, the loneliness of being overlooked, and she poured her energy into lifting others, one small gesture at a time. But not everyone applauded. Old neighbors who had once pitied her now eyed her with suspicion. An old friend stopped her in the street one day, demanding money for introducing her to Richard. Another warned her darkly, "You'll lose it all if you're not careful." Anna held her ground, polite but firm. She would not let gossip define her story. Despite the doubts swirling around her, the evidence of change was undeniable. Chris's grades improved. Anna's instructors began praising her diligence. Her self-esteem, once paper-thin, grew like a backbone of steel. Each day, she carried herself a little taller, not out of arrogance but out of gratitude. One night, standing on the balcony after Chris had gone to bed, Anna looked up at the stars. The city hummed below, but here she felt suspended between two worlds, the one she had come from and the one she was building. She thought of the rainy day under the billboard, of the trembling hands that had taken her food. It felt like another lifetime. She whispered softly to herself, "I'll keep planting seeds. I'll keep giving back." Behind her, Richard's voice floated from the living room, warm and steady. "And you'll watch them grow.